What's going on, everybody? My name is Hassiem, and you are listening to The Actor's Instrument, your source for industry insight and inspiration. We've got an incredible guest lined up for you this week. I honestly don't know if I've ever met someone as resilient as Sarah Allyn. A U.S. Army brat, Sarah was originally born in Wuerzburg, Germany, and proceeded to travel the world starting at 9 years old. Their early and consistent exposures to different places, cultures, and characters gave them an intuitive ability to imitate and adapt. They've worked for the U.S. Department of Defense, fought cancer into remission, had a child during the pandemic, and not a single speed bump along the way has deterred them from their pursuits as an actor, and I think we could all learn a great deal from their tenacity. I hope everything is good with your situation this morning. I hope you're well.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I was thinking about it right before we got on, and I was like, this was kind of a good lead into the actor's instrument because just the way I kind of think about my instrument being like my brain, my body, and my emotions is kind of how I divide it up. And
Sure.
a lot of times I tend to cover up my emotions
Mhm.
and super compensate for those with my brain, my intellect, being overly analytical, and by being physical. I'd much rather work out, go run, go lift weights when
Right.
I have to deal with some sort of big thing, and until something kind of comes along and kicks me in the ass.
Yep. And it's just slow down. You're gonna slow
Right.
down.
Yeah, and so that's something that I'm being very, very much forced to deal with right now is over some time I've been having a lot of random odds and ends go very wrong with my body.
Mm,
And so today I started having a sneezing fit. I
mhm,
couldn't like sneeze after sneeze after sneeze after sneeze just going straight through. I couldn't
mhm,
stop. And when I finally stopped sneezing and like my eyes were itchy and my nose, my ears were all itchy and my
mhm.
hands were starting to itch and my mouth was swelling, like the inside of my mouth.
Oh, an allergic
And so I had
reaction.
severe allergic reaction. And
Oh,
this is the second time that this has happened in the last like 4 months, I think.
mhm.
Excuse me, I'm still a little bit
No,
clogged
you're
up
good. You're good.
apparently. But yeah, so I'm currently on a journey of I've been speaking to a dermatologist because some of it has involved eczema. I've been speaking to an obstetrician to try and figure out if my hormones might be crazy because I do have a
Okay.
kid, and that's something that like changes your body drastically over the course of years.
Yep.
Even though postpartum is typically seen as only 6 weeks, it's my kid is 3.5 now, and like my body is not what I
Sure.
used to have.
Yeah.
Um, and then I might be referred to an allergist now because of this situation, and it's a trip, man.
I feel you. Well, I'm glad you're okay. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's like you said, it's kind of serendipitous that that happened to you this morning because we're talking about the instrument and yeah, your body is your instrument. And the thing is, like, we only get one of them. Like this is our vessel for storytelling.
Yeah,
So and what I from what I know about you, and the reason why I think you're great for this show is that I believe that our life experiences become a part of our instrument, right? And
absolutely.
and you've had some very unique life experiences. Um, so to start off, I'm so you were in the military, right?
Uh, I was never personally in active duty military.
Copy.
Um, so both of my grandfathers were Army. My dad was Army, and he was in it for like 25 years. So I grew up my whole life. I went to Department of Defense schools. I was actually born in Germany, um, which was part of like one of my greatest outsider stories. Is I moved to my first civilian town, and it was from Germany, and they just could not get it that I
Mhm.
was not German. They were like, "Oh, it's the German girl. That's so cool. We're so excited to have you here." And I'd be like, "I'm not German though." And they'd be like, "Yeah, but
Right.
okay, so where were you born?" And I was like, "Well, Germany, but like it was the first time we were staying."
So technically I'm German, but
So I was, and then my oldest brother was active duty Army as well, and he actually just retired from active duty military service.
okay.
And then my first job out of college was working for the Department of Defense of the Army, and I was a contract specialist, which is kind of I was going to be a contracting officer in Afghanistan, which is technically by federal regulation the only person who's allowed to financially obligate the federal government.
Huh.
So you have to go to what they call in theater, interestingly enough, into the war zone in order
Hmm.
to like write these unique contract vehicle documents to say like, yes, we in fact need to buy all these like used vehicles that we can put a bunch of like, you know, metal all over them and make
Got
them
you.
protected against our soldiers getting shot at. Like, yes, actually, we need to go buy this fencing material from these local people because like we need to put up something outside the green zone, like we, whatever it may
Copy.
be.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was technically in a deployed status in Fort Benning, Georgia,
Uh-huh.
and I had been issued all of my like um, the helmet and the flak vest and all that other stuff, and then was diagnosed with cancer with less than 48 hours to fly
Right.
out to Kuwait, and so then I got sent back home, which at the time was Maryland,
Hmm.
and that started my next like 180-degree turn, which does, it's like not even a 180 or a 360, it's
Pendulum.
like a 540.
Like
I
you're,
feel like it's just like
yeah, like the, I mean, I can only imagine like the news of a cancer diagnosis, like what that does to your world, your worldview, and like your, like everything about how you move through this world changes in an instant. I imagine.
yeah. I mean, it did for me personally, it was out of sheer logistics. Like
Hmm.
I was supposed to be in Afghanistan and I had to call my parents and I did it over Skype and I was like, "Hey, so if you look in my background, you see that I'm not in Afghanistan. And the reason for that is I got a cancer diagnosis."
Right.
So, like it suddenly changed my relationship to everyone because, I was put on full-time medical leave from my job. I wasn't allowed to go to a war zone for 6 months, which was
Right.
probably ultimately a good thing. It changed the way that people interacted with me. It was actually really life affirming for me, oddly enough, because I was getting so frustrated by what I was doing and starting to think poorly of the way that humanity works. And then when I got this diagnosis, everybody rallied around me, and the government has this really cool sick leave donation program,
Hmm.
and tons of people donated sick leave to me. So I was
Oh, it's
able to
amazing.
have, yeah, yeah. So I had months where I got to take a nap when I was tired from chemotherapy. I got to continue to try and go work out when I had the energy to keep my health up, and I had full pay the whole time.
Oh,
So it was
that's
really
a blessing.
fantastic.
So, okay, so you're getting ready to leave for Afghanistan. About how old are you at this time?
Boy, that was in 2012.
Okay, so
So
it's
I
about,
was in my like early 20s, mid 20s.
copy. Yeah, yeah. So about 11 years ago. And then you get this cancer diagnosis. How long was this battle with cancer? What did that look like?
So I started treatment August 5th of 2012,
Hmm.
and I finished treatment in November.
Okay.
It was, I went through RCHOP 21, 6 rounds of it, which RCHOP is a specific cocktail of chemotherapy,
Hmm.
and the 21 stands for you get it every 21 days, every three
Okay.
weeks.
Copy.
And I was deemed to be in remission
Hmm.
October 24th.
Hmm.
But because the way they do these things, they're like, we finished the whole course of action that we know to be the thing that worked in the tests that we did leading up to
Sure.
this. We're not going to give you less than what we know works, just
Right.
in case.
Right. Let's not. Yeah, we're not gonna mess with that. Um. Okay. So, and have you been in remission ever since?
I have, yeah, a little over 10 years.
Praise God. Praise God. Okay. So where does acting come into play?
Oh,
How did you? Yeah.
well,
What was your entrance into the industry?
okay, so because to me, that's almost two different questions, right? Like,
Sure.
as a kid, Um, I think that I just loved to replay things in my head all the time. And I would imagine them visually in my mind, whether it was a music video that I loved or whether it was a cartoon that I watched that I would like place myself into and imagine how that cartoon would look with me in it.
Mm.
Um, whether it like whatever it was, I would replay conversations or fights in my head over and over and over again. And
That's. I feel like we lived the same childhood. That was, you know,
okay.
like when people ask me like how I started acting, I immediately go to being a kid. I have six sisters. So
I saw that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's a lot, man.
yeah. So big family, and we don't come from money, and so our parents were always working, and so we'd be home alone a lot. And
Okay. Latchkey kids.
yep, and we would just play pretend like all day long. We would love to whatever our favorite TV show or movie was at the time. We would like reenact that. We were big fans of like the Home Alone movies, so we would set booby traps around the house. We put each other
Well,
through our booby
boy.
traps. Um, yeah, so yeah, so I resonate with that. Yeah, those childhood like playing pretend, being like that germ of this crazy adventure
Yeah.
we've chosen. Yeah.
Did any of your booby traps ever backfire when mom and dad came home?
No, we made sure that the booby traps were up before our parents got home. I mean, we used to
That's
do like crazy.
amazing.
We I remember in my mom's house there was like my sister's bedroom was right across the hall from the bathroom, and so we put like tripwire in between the two rooms, and like and
Okay.
we would purposely go to like we were like testing them out. We would like put banana peels on like the kitchen floor. So you like walk in and like slip, and banana peels are slippery. It's not just a
They
thing.
are.
It's if you
Yeah.
step on a banana peel, you're going down. Okay. um, yeah, crazy. Okay, so your
But
love
entering
for
the industry,
so your love for play and storytelling started as
yeah,
a kid, but your interest in the industry.
yeah, was very different. So I did like theater in high school, and in college I did a little bit, but my appeal at that point in my life was always towards on-camera work. And I didn't know that there were any schools that you could go to and train for on-camera performance. I didn't know that you could go to film school to learn how to make films.
Sure.
And I had that mentality of like, okay, well, I'm going to college, so it's time to get serious now. So ended up with a degree in anthropology, which I don't know like how serious that is, but a business minor.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until the cancer diagnosis that I got back into acting.
Huh.
So the cancer diagnosis happened, and I just don't sit still well. I really don't. So I was put on full-time
You
medical
and me
leave from my
both.
job.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I was like, well, what do I do now? And I'm not just gonna like sit around and be an invalid. I was like, okay, let me go audition for the local theater.
Hmm.
And I got a part in Dog Sees God, and my castmates were awesome. They got me a wig because when they cast me, I was like, hey, I got to be honest and let you know that like all my hair is going to be gone in like 6 weeks,
Sure.
possibly less.
Hmm.
So they got me a wig, and then they started teaching me about all the resources in the area. And I was in Maryland at the time.
Copy.
And Veep and House of Cards were just starting to shoot,
Hmm.
and one of the stages was like 5 minutes from my apartment.
Yo. Okay.
Yeah, yep. So I started doing background work and student films and industrials. And I booked my first SAG-AFTRA national network commercial. Didn't even realize that was what it was. Started getting money in, and I was like, oh, there's an option for me to not like hate my job and make a decent amount of money.
Well, you
So
look at that.
I know, counterintuitive to any and every person in the rest of the world who gets into acting. Like I actually got into it because I was like, I just need a different job. I need a different gig. Uh,
Copy. It makes total sense. It's like
yeah.
there's, like I want to be enjoying life right now. I want to be doing something I enjoy. I need a big change of pace. And if you come from a world that's not the arts world, that's not the performance art, the show business, like that's I'm imagining like a huge shift because like that's all for me, like that's all I ever wanted to do after the age of maybe like 12 or so. So
Amazing.
yeah, so when I went to school, I went to high school for acting. Like that's how early I
I
started.
was gonna say, yeah, you went to special high school that was an arts high school, right?
Yeah, so for me, my trajectory has always been this business, but I can imagine, and I tell myself like I can never imagine sitting in a cubicle and like having a boss. Like I love being a freelancer, but I imagine if you're on the other side of it, there's probably a sense of like if you want to get free from that, the arts is like the perfect place to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it suits everybody. But yeah, the way that you speak of imagining working in cubicle
Hmm.
is absolutely how I felt about it. And I remember I would get the Saturday dreads for my job because I knew that Sunday was going to be spent in preparation for the week. Sunday was
Right.
going to be cooking like meal preps and laundry
Uh-huh.
and grocery shopping and all the stuff. And so like I would get halfway or 2/3 the way through my Saturday and just start getting tense and stressed out because I was like, I'm losing my time. I don't get any more me until next Saturday.
Right.
Um, and so yeah, it was not a place that was great for me. And I still know a lot of people who do that job, and I respect them so much because flat out I could not do it.
Right. Right.
I couldn't.
Now, okay, so as is the theme of your life, at least the life that what I know of you, like you
It's
said,
being painted so far.
these 540s, right? So I'm assuming another 540 was the beginning of you starting your own family.
Uh, kind of, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got pregnant in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and I will say that at that time, my representation, I think, did not know how to handle it. And so
Mm.
I like everything stopped dead in its tracks in terms of auditions for me,
Oh, wow.
unfortunately. I think after a couple of months, I wasn't planning on telling anybody I was pregnant, but I got an opportunity. I was requested for an audition that had really wide outside dates.
Uh-huh.
And um, there had a scene in it that I was like, I have to tell you guys that with these outside dates between this date and this date, I'm gonna look wildly different.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I ended up being forced. Again, like some similar with the cancer thing, I had in my mind that I wouldn't tell anybody if I was diagnosed with cancer,
Yeah.
and then I kind of had to tell everybody I was diagnosed with cancer. I wasn't planning on telling anybody that I was pregnant, and then I had to tell everybody that
Right.
I was pregnant. And then everything stopped, and a couple months went by, and I think one of my agents actually forgot. So
LOL.
I got like 3 more auditions at the same office, like very quickly in succession. So I was really excited because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is an office I've never been in for. They
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
calling me back in. This is great. But by the third audition with them, it was like there was no hiding it anymore. And I
Got you.
actually have not been back in for that office ever since that moment. And I'm sure that it's not because I was pregnant and it was betrayal, but it's like we were developing a relationship and they probably very much made the decision like, oh, we cannot call this person in for a few more months at least until they
Right.
like pop and are past.
Right. Right.
Because for all
Eh,
that it's not fair to be a pregnant woman, so to say, because I identify as non-binary and to be
mhm.
taken out of work, it is a logistics decision, right? Like
Right.
there are higher liabilities and you don't have as much energy and just a lot of stuff around it. I can
Yeah.
understand why logistically companies decide not to go that route, which is
Yeah.
not fun.
And our industry has I was gonna say a bad rap, but I think it's just true. Like not it's not the rumor mill. It's our industry is not great at handling pregnancies when it comes to work. I mean, you hear those like wonderful stories about like, oh, they rewrote this for the character, or
Yeah.
so and so just stood behind the piano all episode, or carried around a big tote bag, or
Right.
those like accommodations for people. But I feel like the reality is that's probably say you're one of the top billed folks on set
Yeah.
and you're already in it versus like if it's a new hire and honestly, and this is one
Yeah.
of those things that like obviously we're talking about our industry, but it expands beyond our industry
I was
like
gonna say, I would say our country is pretty awful at handling pregnancy.
yeah, especially in the interview process. My sister recently lost her job, and so she's on the hunt, and she just got pregnant, and so now it's like a thing of like uh
Do you disclose this information or not?
right, because to an employer, like you said, logistically in their heads it's like, oh, we hire this person and then we are going to lose them
Yeah.
for
I mean,
a certain
honestly,
amount of
for
time,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean, for a woman in America, they've actually done studies that show that if a man mentions to his employer that he has a family and has kids, he is seen as more reliable and is more likely to get higher pay because he has to provide for a family. Whereas, in contrast, these same studies show that women who tell to their employer that they have a family are actually oftentimes less respected and given less money and seen as less reliable because they're going to have to leave the office to take care of the kids.
So wild.
What's going on, everybody? Hassiem here. I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. And if you haven't heard already, The Actor's Instrument is now a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment, We're excited to continue to bring you the best industry insights and introduce you to new artists who are making it work. And with this partnership with Red Letter, we're excited to bring you even more content, live episodes, and Q&As. New episodes of The Actor's Instrument will drop every Tuesday. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to check us out at theactorsinstrument.com and follow Actors Instrument Podcast on all social media platforms so you never miss a beat.
So 3 years ago, you had a kid.
Oh, and then the pandemic hit.
And then the world shut down. Oh my God.
Yeah,
That was like
so
the next year.
yeah,
Holy.
he was born end of November, and middle of March is when New York City shut down. So he was like 3 months old. I was just getting to a point where I was going to try, like, I was a member at a gym that had a like daycare facility,
Mhm.
pseudo daycare facility. You could drop your kid off while you worked out for 45 minutes. And I was like, I'll be in the same building. It's just
Right.
45 minutes. Like, we're going to start doing this thing.
Yep.
And then everything shut down.
Oh my goodness. I feel like your life is like one event. I mean, we all share the pandemic, but it's the
Of course,
irony,
yeah.
the irony. But what I think is so awesome about you, Sarah, is like you keep coming back.
Thank you.
You're so resilient. I mean, like, I feel like if somebody met you today, they would have no idea this trajectory you've been on. So yeah, like, I mean,
Right? It's hard to like walk up to somebody and be like, "Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a cancer survivor with a kid who was born in the pandemic," and like,
right, and I was born in
like,
Germany, and yeah, all these things.
yeah.
But it's amazing. So before, okay, because I have sort of like a culminating question, but before that, something else I wanted to tap into was there's a lot of conversations right now around identity.
Mhm.
And if you don't mind, feel free to answer however you see fit. And I know that you understand where I'm coming from, which is why I feel comfortable asking this. So
Good.
you are Korean American, right?
Yeah.
And maybe debatably white passing at the same time.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely. Yes.
So what has that experience been like? Because I'll leave it at that. Like, what has that experience been like?
Yeah, so it's something that I still think about very regularly. My grandmother is the one who is from South Korea, and so I grew up, and that very much influenced my life. I mean, I still remember being in school the first time at a military school,
Mhm.
and somebody not knowing what kimchi was, and me being like, "Wait, how do you not have like kimchi and kim rice at Thanksgiving? Why do you not have like don't you have rice like every night?" And
Right.
people know it's not how most people eat, and so
Sure.
it's something that's definitely informed me and who I am as a person. And I had the privilege of being, I always forget if it's considered second or third generation. I think it's third generation because my grandmother
Mhm.
immigrated, and then my mother was born here, and then I was born here.
Copy.
I had the privilege of when people looked at me most of my life and said, "You're something, aren't you? What are you?" I
Mhm.
got to see that as a compliment and with pride be like, I'm a quarter Korean, and then like my dad's
Yeah.
side is Irish, and I also have some like Welsh and things going on in there. And I only, when I moved to New York City,
Mhm.
is when all this kind of started coming to a head, because New York City is one of the most diverse places I've ever lived in my life,
Yeah.
and yet it is so divisive.
Yes.
Like, you have the Russian neighborhood, you have the Dominican neighborhood, you have the, like, there's so many
The West
neighborhoods that it's like, oh, if
Africans and the Bangladeshis
yeah,
and the
yeah, and we're all there, and yet so few people choose to mix in any social capacity at all.
Right.
Um, and that's when people started telling me that I was like white on white bread, like not even just a little bit, but like Wonder White bread. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, "Excuse me, I don't think that's right." And I had to go back to my mom and be like, "Mom, I've never asked you. I have these different memories of her telling me racism that she's had to encounter, and I remember watching her fill out medical forms and being so frustrated and like struggling because there wasn't a box for her.
Sure.
And because for her, there was white, there was black, there was Hispanic, and then there was sometimes, not always, Pacific Islander because of World War II in Japan. And a lot of
Sure.
people associated Pacific Islander also with football players. And so my mom would get really
Oh,
frustrated and be
really?
like, people are just, oh my God, yeah,
I feel
she
like I've
didn't
never
know
heard
what to
that.
check.
Man.
And she would get upset if people thought that she was a Pacific Islander, because she was like, that's just people's way of saying I look fat. And it was not.
Uh,
Yeah. So like I have these things. I've watched my mother my whole life struggle with this stuff, right? Which is probably part of why I took some of it on as my identity.
gotcha.
Uh, and I asked her, I was like, what do you consider yourself to be? Do you consider yourself to be Korean or Asian American, Korean American? Do you
Hmm.
consider yourself to be a person of color? Do you consider yourself to be white? Like maybe that is.
Yeah.
And she had an answer that I thought was, I don't know if she even knows how smart I think this answer is. And she said, Sarah, once upon a time, I was, but I don't think I am anymore. Maybe it was the other way around. And what she was saying is, she was saying that based on the terminology and based on her privilege over the course of
Hmm.
time has changed. And that now she
Mm,
is a person in a position of great privilege. And
sure.
she doesn't face a lot of judgment and racism for the way that she looks. Whereas once upon a time, I mean, she was one of 5 kids
Mhm.
brought up by a widowed mom in Kansas in the 70s. So, like, that's a
Oh,
pretty,
oh boy.
it's, yeah, it's a bit of a different circumstance.
Right.
Uh, then now, she and my dad are both retired in a nice home, and they now live in Oklahoma, but like in a pretty progressive area in Tulsa, and like
Sure.
she's doing well. And so my identity, I've had to go back and forth with a lot, because I have had to recognize the way that I walk through the world and
Hmm.
the privilege that that allows me. And yet I've also at this current point in time decided that I refuse to let anybody else decide how Korean I am,
Hmm.
and what ties I'm allowed to have to my family.
Sure.
So to me, I am holding the line that I am Korean American.
Hmm.
I am I'm a white woman by all perceptions walking through the world. For all, again, like identify as non-binary.
Yeah, yeah.
I do think I'm going to intentionally teach my son that he is a white all-American boy, and that he can choose his gender and his orientation whenever he wants, but uh, I want him to learn that he is of Korean descent, that that's where he's
Sure.
from, because he'll have never met the person that came from Korea.
Sure. And it's funny because, like you said, you're white passing, but at the same time, like when you say you're Korean American, if I look at you, I'm like, yeah, I see it. And not like, and
And
I,
I,
and I don't even think I have to look really, really hard. Like, I'm just like, yeah, I see it. It's,
yeah,
yeah. So I feel you there. And I'm so happy for you that you've given yourself the, the space, to step into that part of yourself and to own it. And like you said, to not allow anyone else to define it for you. I think that's
yeah.
important. And so now I'm curious, as you have embraced that part of yourself, how has that affected your career? Where does that identity fit into your to your work as an actor?
It does. It absolutely informs it. I have had a few opportunities that come along that are looking for mixed Asian.
Mhm.
Twice specifically was looking for quarter mixed Asian. I was like, yes,
That's you.
that is right.
That's you.
That is me. That is me. Like, there's no fudging of this. There's nobody
Right.
that I'm going to show up into a room and they're going to be like, what are you doing here?
Right.
And I have to explain the whole thing.
Mhm.
And I also don't have to feel bad, because I do know that representation matters. And I do know that there are Asian Americans, people who are born here, people who have been here for generations,
Mhm.
who still look 100% ethnically Southeast Asian or Asian from anywhere else, who
Sure.
look like they are not American. And I know that that's important.
Right. Right.
So the idea of taking on any Asian American role for me is one that I always have to do kind of a double check on. Like,
Sure.
is this something that I feel right doing?
Mhm.
Or is this something that I need to decline because it's better suited to somebody else?
Sure.
So that's definitely one element. Another one is, so as an anthropology major, for all that it's not necessarily learning to become like a doctor, a lawyer, or a
Uh-huh.
very practical education, it does teach you a way of thinking.
Mhm.
And there's this theory within it that's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and it speaks about language and how much we are informed by versus inform our language. And
Mm.
so, because of my experience with languages growing up in different countries and different regions for that matter, in Arizona, when I was
Mhm.
6, I learned Spanish in class in school.
Sure.
I'm learning more Korean, and I'm learning more about the culture than what I was raised with. And I think all of it informs me in a really beautiful way. I think it helps me see the beauty in the
Hmm.
differences between every single person and every single story. And it just it's expansive. And I think that's the way differences ultimately always should be, is that rather than finding the differences and finding the ways to pick them apart and cordon them off and separate them and
Yeah.
separate us, but to see those differences and be like, wow, that's amazing, that's beautiful, I've never seen that before, or I've never
Hmm.
heard that before, I never would have thought of it that way if you hadn't shared with me how you respond to this.
Right.
um
I love it. I love you
so
say it's,
that's
it's expansive. I love that.
yeah,
It's not just that you can quite literally go in for different roles now, but it's that you bring this experience wherever you go, for whatever
hmm
character you're playing. It's different for me. Like, the thing that typically separates me from other people immediately is, within our industry, is my faith. So I'm Muslim, and
yeah,
it's a thing where I'm like, I kind of dawned on me, recently. I was like, I think just all the characters I play are Muslim because I am,
yeah,
like, in a way. And obviously some are written very specifically as maybe something else, but that's what I bring to the table. Like,
no,
if you
absolutely.
yeah, it's like if somebody hires me or hires you, like, they're bringing us, like, that individual is what's coming into the room. um and with you, like, your individuality is so layered, right? From thinking you were going to spend a life maybe touring, doing military work, like, ready to hop on a plane to Afghanistan, to cancer, to childbirth. um how have those experiences that for most people, like just any one of those would rock their world, how have those affected your work? How have those experiences maybe changed or, altered the way that you operate as a storyteller?
Yeah, they've really been gifts. And like I wouldn't recommend anybody get cancer on purpose, but
So just hang out in front of a microwave every day for 2 to 3 minutes.
right? But they've been really great gifts because there's a book that I read that's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And it's a
I've heard.
very easy read. I don't know that I'm a huge fan of the author, but I do think that the principle in his book is fairly true,
Mhm.
is that when you go through things that are kind of earth shaking or foundation, rocking, it's one of those, it gives you a lot of perspective.
Mm.
And it makes you realize that there's a lot in the world that you can freak out about. Like it's not invalid to freak out about, I don't know, a test next week. But when you've got a test next week and you're stressing out about that, versus in Ukraine right now, children are being separated from their parents. People
Yeah.
have been bombed for over a year now.
Yeah.
There are war crimes being committed on the daily. Like suddenly my test doesn't feel quite so life defining,
Mm.
and so it's kind of the same thing. And there were some lessons that I had been told prior to that in my life that going through actual like full body full life experience,
Yeah.
you know um trials
Hmm.
really firmed up for me. Like I've been a runner for, this keeps coming up lately, I don't know why, I've been a runner for like roughly 20 years.
Okay. Weird.
And whenever you work out, people are always like, "Ah, you've got good days and you've got bad days, and you got to keep getting up and you got to keep working through it." And I
Uh-huh.
believe in that. And sometimes it's just like, man, I suck today. I
Yeah.
really suck today. But when I got diagnosed with cancer, and I had actually just run a half marathon for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, ironically enough.
Wow.
Yeah, and then was diagnosed with lymphoma. But I was immediately told to stop running because the tumor was around my heart. And
Mm.
once I was cleared to start working out again, it was after a few weeks. I went into the little tiny fitness center of my apartment complex, and
Hmm.
I hit the treadmill, and 30 seconds in, 30 seconds in of jogging on a treadmill, I had to hit the emergency stop button and like drop to my knees and couldn't breathe. I
Jeez.
don't know how much of this was like any sort of damage that was done from my heart versus chemotherapy versus like what, I don't know what it
Yeah.
was. All I know is It was, you know, a hard stop. And so over the course of weeks, I was like, okay, like I've got cancer. I'm going through chemotherapy. Like that sucks, but let's keep going, right? We're
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
get what we can get while we're going through this. And over the course of weeks, I built myself up, built myself up, built myself up. I was doing intervals and I could run for like 3 minutes at a time
Hmm.
without stopping. And I would take a break. And I went in, I was like, okay, today I'm going to try and do 5 minutes straight and not stop.
Hmm.
And I had to hit the emergency button at 30 seconds again. I was
Hmm.
so dejected. Just because all that was going on, all of my circumstances, and how hard I had worked to get to the half marathon, how hard I had worked to get to 3 minutes,
Yeah.
to like 3 cycles of 3 minutes. And then it felt like it was all gone. And I think it was 2 weeks before I went back into the fitness center.
Hmm.
And when I went back in, though, I ran 20 minutes without stopping. And I hadn't done that since
Oh, wow.
pre-treatment. And so that was the first time for me that it was really like, oh no, I can have a really bad day. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I'm not going to kick ass 2 weeks from now.
Oh,
So I,
such a valuable lesson. Oh my goodness.
yeah. And like people can tell you that over and over and over again, but it didn't quite land the same way until I had something that stark and that defining really, really land it home for me.
Yeah. And if any and if any industry, like, you know, people exist in and they get constantly kicked down, constantly told no.
Yes.
It's like you're constant
Over and over.
like you're constantly on the treadmill and passing out after 30 seconds, so to speak, you know, like,
Yeah.
but you know, hearing your story, like you just talking about just that struggle with running again, I'm like, it makes so much, like who you are today makes so much sense to me now, because I'm like,
Yeah.
you are relentless. You
For better or worse, people look out.
What I know about you is that you hate like not achieving a goal, even if it's not like a super big thing, but just like, man, I thought I'd be here in a month and like I'm not. It makes sense, and I think that I don't know, I think it's so awesome how you've translated those experiences to your work as an actor, and like just as relentless as you were, like trying to get your body back together, like that's how you're attacking this career. And I think that's how we all have to attack this business. Like no one's going to hand it to us. Like,
Yeah, certainly not.
you know, they'll hand you the nose, you know,
Yeah,
but
very quickly. And there are people out there who will be handed opportunities.
sure.
But we've
Yep.
had that conversation. We're not there.
Yeah. And it's like, and listen, if you're not being handed the opportunities, like that's not you. So you have to go out and get them.
Yes.
And the only thing you can bring with you are your experiences, like
Hmm.
are who you are, those layers, those
Yeah.
tragic diagnoses and life-changing moments, like all of those, I believe, become a part of your instrument and are
Hmm.
only going to, if you can, like harness them to aid in this crazy thing we're trying to do in show business as storytellers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sarah,
I
thank you.
actually
Yeah.
would love to ask you a question if you don't mind, if I'm
Yes,
not
please.
totally burning out all your time.
No, not at all.
I had a teacher say, actually, it was probably a year or two ago now at this point. So many people these days are looking for realism, right? They're saying that they're going to cast you for who you are. And even right now, we're talking about this idea that the more experiences we've had, the more that informs
Mhm.
who we put on camera, right?
Mhm.
That all of your characters are Muslim. And I think it's fantastic because that is not it. And that's a whole nother conversation. That should be the case. I'm glad you're doing that. But I had a teacher who was like, let me be clear. When I tell you to bring you to a character, I
Mhm.
don't mean you. I don't mean you. Some people do. I mean, I want you to bring your palette to this character.
Mhm.
I want you to bring your brushes, your tools. How do you as an artist want to fill this in?
Mhm.
And I've been marinating on what he said because for some reason that is something that was said to me that I could feel like rocked my whole body. And I
Mhm.
was like, this has shifted the way I look at the world, at my artistic world, and my art and creativity.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how yet. I don't know how.
Yeah.
And so for you, do you find much room to play between who you are versus what you bring to something? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's layered, right? So for me, optimally, I can step into a character that's very much like myself. And
Yeah.
I don't mean like that's the most interesting thing, because obviously like, oh, we get to transform and be chameleons. But what I mean is like, likely that is your strongest point of entry. Likely, right? So layer one is like, if you're playing a certain character, right, that's like, says they have a tumultuous relationship with their parent, we'll say, right? If you have had a tumultuous relationship with your parent, great. You're
Yeah.
gonna
It just slides right on.
exactly. I think the second layer is, if you don't, do you know somebody who does? Do you have a friend growing up who had a tumultuous relationship, or a cousin, or whoever? Have you watched it on TV? Like, are you engrossed in a series where that's the relationship and you've been watching it for however long the show's been running? And then the third layer is like, if it's not your experience, if it's not the experience of somebody can you imagine it? Right. And I think from what I'm hearing, my interpretation is what your teacher was talking about is that third layer. And so I think that they're all valuable. And I'm sure in like probably a conversation for another time, like, they're all pieces of your instrument, and you have to be able to like switch into one or the other. Right. So I think today we've been talking mostly about that first layer, right? That like, just what are your experiences? What do you bring to the table when you walk into the door? And then for me, the other layers are why you go to school. The other layers are why we train and do all these other things to work on our instrument. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely it, and one of the things that's both beautiful and maddening about our industry is that there's no wrong answer, right?
Yeah, honestly, and like,
So,
there's no wrong answer, and also on some level, it doesn't even matter like our perception, because all of the work we do are in service of others. We tell stories for an audience. So is the audience affected by what you're doing? If the answer is yes, then you're doing the right thing. Then that's the right answer.
right?
You know?
That's such a tricky one because it's like it's that idea of, well, I'm doing this thing and it felt so real and it felt so genuine and all of us were in it together, but if it doesn't translate, it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
there's this one film acting teacher that like, he's like, yeah, all the backstory stuff that actors do, they'll write pages and pages. It's mostly a theater thing. He was like, I've never seen it like change a performance. And that's what he believes.
okay.
He believes he's
Yeah.
like whatever's on the page, he's like, just do that. Like, the audience has no idea that you have chosen an elementary school for your character that they went to 20 years before the play started. They have no idea, and they cannot perceive that your character has an imaginary friend.
Right.
And I think I think it's that's an oversimplification. I think it's maybe a little more nuanced.
Yeah.
I think that like, sometimes there are those things that are on the page that do make a difference, and if you can figure out what those are, that's going to be the thing that sets you apart and is going to really change your performance. But yeah, at face value, I think it's like, the experiences you bring that's what's going to make you different, because you are different as a human being. Like, Sarah Allyn, like, you are the only Sarah Allyn.
It amazes me that the more specific I get, the more it seems to resonate with a broader audience.
Sure.
When I've written, and as to the backstory not mattering, I will say I was fortunate enough to have a casting director say, I will never know the choices you make, but I'll always see the results of them. So that's my counter argument to your teacher who's like, I don't care about backstory.
Listen,
you make your imaginary friend. We all had him as a kid. A lot of us did.
Listen, I love it. Like you said, there's no wrong answer, right? So
yeah,
whatever
Sarah, serves you.
Right. So Sarah, how can people catch up with you? How can they find you, see your work?
Yeah,
Social
media
handles, best places, website, whatever.
Instagram and IMDb Pro. So IMDb Pro will have my filmography and my representation, and then Instagram is where I don't post on there very often, but I occasionally I'm so bad at it, but I'll post more stories. I share things that I find inspiring, and you'll see my kid on there and a little bit of my opinions.
Amazing. So just at Sarah Allyn.
At Sarah.Allyn, Allyn.
Amazing. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on The Actor's Instrument. It's been a privilege to have you on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Actor's Instrument. I'm Hassiem Muhammad, and you can follow me at Hassiem Muhammad and the show at Actors Instrument Podcast on all social media platforms. The Actors Instrument is a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment. Executive producers, Adam Jellicourse, Serena Esposito, and yours truly. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check us out at theactorsinstrument.com. We'll be back next Tuesday. Till next time, y'all. Peace.